Namaste. Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Prasharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Shkati Satatma Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Radha Krishna 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 Radhe Radhe Krishna 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 Radhe Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Radhe Krishna 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 Radhe 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 Krishna 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 Radhe Radhe Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada,
Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki jai.
Om Ajnanaatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrinda Vrindeshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Dean Prabhu, do you have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita in front of you?
No, Mataji, I don't have a copy, unfortunately.
Okay.
We haven't been able to unpack the boxes.
All
It's all in which, yeah.
No, that's fine. Then I'll hand it over to maybe Paramatma Prabhu. Would you like to read the introduction prayer, please?
Hare Krishna Mataji. Okay,
Yeah, I was born.
Open up the book, Mataji.
I was born in darkest ignorance.
Hare Krishna, I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, and unto the feet of all Vaishnavas. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of all Vaishnavas. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami, along with his elder brother, Sanatana Goswami, as well as Raghunath Dasa and Raghunath Bhatta, Gopala Bhatta, and Srila Jiva Goswami. I offer my respectful obeisances to Lord Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, along with Advaita Acharya, Gadadhar, Srivas, and other associates. I offer my respectful obeisances to Srimati Radharani and Sri Krishna, along with their associates, Sri Lalita and Vishaka. Oh, my dear Krishna, you are the friend of the distress and the source of creation. You are the master of the gopis and the lover of Radharani. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I offer my respects to Radharani, whose bodily complexion is like molten gold and who is the queen of Vrindavan. You are the daughter of King Vrishabhanu, and you are very dear to Lord Krishna. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, just like desire trees, and they are full of compassion for the fallen souls. I offer my obeisances to Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadar, Sri Vas, and all others in the line of devotion. Hare Krishna Maji, thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu. So last week we read, we started chapter 6, which is the second part of Bhagavad Gita, right? Which we refer to as Bhakti Yoga. Now, we read, I think, only 2 verses. I don't know if you want to recap those 2 verses. Paramatma Prabhu, shall we just read through those 2 again?
Yes,
I know it
please,
was very
Mataji.
brief last week.
Yes, please do, Mataji, please do.
Okay, so let's read. It's just a few verses. Let's do it. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Anashitaha karma phalam, karyam karma karoti ya, sasanyasi cha yogi cha, na nirna chakriyaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, oh, sorry, I have not shared my screen. Do that quickly. Okay. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is a true mystique, not one who lights no fire and performs no duty. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In this chapter, the Lord explains that the process of the eightfold yoga system is a means to control the mind and the senses. However, this is very difficult for people in general to perform, especially in the age of Kali. Although the eightfold yoga system is recommended in this chapter, the Lord emphasizes that the process of karma yoga, or acting in Krishna consciousness, is better. Everyone acts in this world to maintain his family and their paraphernalia, but no one is working without some self-interest, some personal gratification, be it concentrated or extended. The criterion of perfection is to act in Krishna consciousness and not with a view of enjoying the fruits of work. To act in Krishna consciousness is the duty of every living entity because all are constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme. The parts of the body work for the satisfaction of the whole body. The limbs of the body do not act for the satisfaction, does not act for self-satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the complete whole. Similarly, the living entity who acts for satisfaction of the supreme whole and not for personal satisfaction is a perfect sannyasi, the perfect yogi. Okay, so let's just stop here a little bit. Basically here, Prabhupada is using this very nice analogy here about parts of the body. So when the hand works, it doesn't work only for itself. It works for this entire body of ours, to serve the entire body, right? If we want to eat, we don't, when we eat, we don't take the food and just point it to our stomach, point it towards our belly on the outer side, don't we? We eat it through our mouth. And then there's a whole process that goes through, where you've got to chew, and then the digestive juices come into effect, and the fire of digestion helps burn that food, and then it gets transformed into energy, and the entire body gets satisfied. But you see, each part of the body works for the satisfaction of the whole body. It comes together and acts for the satisfaction of the whole body. That's what Prabhupada is saying here. So likewise, he's saying, similarly, the living entity who are us, the jivas, who act for the satisfaction of the supreme whole and not for personal satisfaction, is a perfect sannyasi. So we jivas are like different limbs of the body. If we act only for ourselves, it's going to be like no effect, right? But if we act for the supreme whole, who is the supreme Lord, and not for satisfying just us, our bodies, then such a person is a perfect yogi. That is our goal, right? So basically, bottom line, we have to act how? In Krishna consciousness, in God consciousness. Right. The purport continues. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties, and therefore they cease to perform agnihotra yajnas, or fire sacrifices. But actually, they are self-interested because their goal is to become one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self-interest. Similarly, the mystique yogi who practices the yoga system with half-open eyes, seizing all material activities, desires some satisfaction for his personal self. But a person acting in Krishna consciousness works for the satisfaction of the whole without self-interest. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for self-satisfaction. His criterion of success is the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus he is the perfect sannyasi or the perfect yogi. See, don't take you back there. The Prabhupada said that here. One who acts for the supreme and not for personal sense satisfaction is a perfect sannyasi or perfect yogi. And this is repeated here, right? The Krishna conscious person is therefore the perfect sannyasi or the perfect yogi. Prabhupada continues to say, Lord Chaitanya, the highest perfectional symbol of renunciation, prays in this way. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. What I want only is the causeless mercy of your pure devotion, of your devotional service in my life, birth after birth. So you see from this purport we learn, this is how we should pray. We should pray for devotional service, because when you get devotional service, you're engaging in serving or pleasing the Lord. And then you are acting on the platform of Krishna consciousness. And when one acts in the platform of Krishna consciousness, then his mindset is to satisfy who? Krishna, but not himself and his senses. And such a person, Prabhupada says, is a perfect sannyasi or a perfect yogi. All right. 6.2. Prabhupada, you want to read?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Krishna.
Should I read the English, Maharaj?
Read from the Sanskrit, read everything.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Yam sannyasam iti prahu yogam tam Vidhi Pandava, Nahi Asanayasta Sankalpo, Yogi Bhavati Kaschana. So, translation: what is called renunciation you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. O son of Pandu, for one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada. Real sannyas yoga or bhakti means that one should know his constitutional position as a living entity and act accordingly. The living entity has no separate identity, independent identity. He is the marginal energy of the Supreme. When he is entrapped by material energy, he is conditioned. And when he is Krishna conscious or aware of the spiritual energy, then he is in his real and natural state of life. Therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all material sense gratification or renounces all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. This is practiced by the yogis who restrain the senses from material attachment. When a person in Krishna consciousness has no opportunity to engage his senses in anything which is not for the purpose of Krishna. Therefore, a Krishna conscious person is simultaneously a sannyasi and a yogi. The purpose of knowledge and of restraining the senses, as prescribed in the jnana and yoga processes, is automatically served in Krishna consciousness. If one is unable to give up the activities of his selfish nature, then jnana and yoga are of no avail. The real aim is for a living entity to give up all selfish satisfaction and to be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for any kind of self-enjoyment. He is always engaged for the enjoyment of the Supreme. One who has no information of the Supreme must therefore be engaged in self-satisfaction, because no one can stand on the platform of inactivity. All purposes are perfectly served by the practice of Krishna consciousness. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. So see, a real sannyasi, Prabhupada says here again, O Bhakti, means that you should know your constitutional position. Know what your position as a living entity is. And once you know what that position is, you act accordingly. And what is that position? That constitutional position, our constitutional position, is to serve. To serve who? To serve the Supreme. To serve Krishna. Right? That's our constitutional position. And when you start doing that, you become Krishna conscious, then such a person is aware of his spiritual energy. He realizes that he has spiritual energy. He is actually spirit soul. And that is he'll also understand that that is his natural state of life. Because remember, we are just embodied in these bodies. We, souls, jivas or atmas, are embodied. We are called embodied beings, right? And it's actually unnatural to be in these material bodies. Your natural state is you, the jiva. And your natural state is to go back to Krishna, because that's where you came from. Right? The spirit soul, we are minute spirit, parts and parcels of the supreme spirit or super soul. Right? And the Prabhupada also here says that the real aim of the living entity is to give up self-satisfaction, to be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. Now, as much as we say devotees or Krishna conscious, God conscious people, they don't have any desire for any kind of self-enjoyment. He's always engaged for enjoyment of the Supreme. But if you're not engaged in the in service of the Lord, of pleasing the Lord, or serving the Lord in any way, you're going to be engaged in some other kind of service, because a living entity cannot remain dormant, so to speak. One cannot remain at a state where he's totally inactive. Inactivity is unnatural for us jivas. Because even though we, the jivas or the atmas, are pure and spiritual, the jiva is still, when it leaves the body, leaves with the mind, intelligence, and false ego. Mind being a very important thing. The mind can never remain inactive. It is always active. Right? So, if this mind is not engaged in God conscious, Krishna conscious activities, it's going to be engaged in other activities for sense gratification, for self-gratification, because it cannot be inactive at any point in time. Even when it leaves this body, the soul will leave with its mind, which is full of activity. It will be thinking at all times. Therefore, this process of Krishna consciousness is so important, because we are now trying to train this mind, the subtle energy within us, to be God conscious. Because when we exit, we need to be thinking of the Lord. We need not be thinking about any material activities or material attachments, because it will just bind us to this material realm and bring us back. And we even spoke previously about, okay, here we're speaking about yogas, different yogas as well, right? Krishna is speaking about that. We'll go more in detail just now. But previously we discussed as well about yogis who practice Astanga yoga and different types of processes, where they try and equalize outgoing and incoming and outgoing breaths. And their aim is to reach the Supreme as well. It's just that it's a longer route. But some of these yogis actually achieve that destination. And their destination is to reach Brahman, right? The effulgence portion of creation, the effulgence of the Lord's body, the area that's people refer to as the light. Now, once a soul reaches there, remember now, coming back to this purport, we say that we cannot remain inactive. The yogi has reached such a high destination, the area of Brahman, but he's taken with him his mind, because it's a subtle energy that forms part of him, mind, intelligence, and ego. Now, as soon as that yogi or that soul, that yogi or that spirit, soul who has left the yogi's body, as soon as it reaches that area of Brahman, it will be very happily situated, having reached its destination. However, as soon as that mind of that jiva starts thinking of anything else, then that jiva must leave that area of Brahman and proceed to take on a body or a form of whatever the mind is desiring. That's how strong the mind is. So therefore, you will find over and over again, Prabhupada says to us, Krishna says to us, that the process of bhakti yoga or devotional service is most recommended. It's the best and surest way of training the mind. Because you can still do activities. You don't have to remain inactive, but you're acting in God consciousness. You are acting in Krishna consciousness. You are dovetailing your actions in the correct channels, right? Because a devotee does not want to, a Krishna conscious devotee does not desire to attain higher planetary systems or to come back to this world and enjoy beautiful material opulence due to some good karma that he has done. No, he does not want that. He only wants to ever be engaged in the service of Krishna. And such a high-level devotee whose consciousness is so elevated, such a devotee, due to all his practices and austerities, talking about our great gurus, our parampara, our Goswamis, personalities of that level, their minds, consciousness is so elevated due to their practice throughout their lifetimes and lifetimes previously, that they surpass all these higher planetary systems and like heavenly planets and Brahman and all these different planetary systems, and go directly back to Krishna. And why? This is pastime. This is pastime. Our gurus and Guru Parapara, our Goswamis, they have come here to teach us how to go back home, how to realize our natural state of life, and how to be aware of our spiritual energy, how to become Krishna conscious, because that is our constitutional position. Well, that's what Prabhupada is reminding us of here in the thought. Okay, next one. Who wants to read next?
I'll read.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Aruruksho mune yogam karma karanam uchyate yoga rudhasya tasyeva samaha karanam uchyate. For one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The process of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga. It may be compared to a ladder of attaining the topmost spiritual realization. This ladder begins from the lowest material conditions of the living entity and rises up to perfect self-realization in pure spiritual life. According to various elevations, different parts of the ladder are known by different names, but all in all, the complete ladder is called yoga and may be divided into three parts, namely Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. The beginning of the ladder is called Yoga Rurukshu stage, and the highest rung is called Yoga Rudha. Concerning the Eightfold Yoga system, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulative principles of life and practice of different sitting positions, which are more or less bodily exercises, are considered fruitive material activities. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. When one is accomplished in the practice of meditation, he ceases all disturbing mental activities. A Krishna conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation because he always thinks of Krishna, and being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, he is considered to have ceased all material activities. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Krishna, thank you. Right, so it still sums up here, Prabhupada still sums up here and says a Krishna conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation because he is always thinks of Krishna. And being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, he is considered to have ceased all material activities. Why? Because his activities are for Krishna. Right, Kadruta Mataji, you want to read 6.4, please?
Yes, just a second, please. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yada hinanyater tesu, nakarmadvan ushajate, sarva sankalpa sanyasi, yoga ruda sadachyate. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when having renounced all material desires. He neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities purpose. When a person is fully engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he is pleased in himself, and thus he is not longer engaged in sense gratification or in fruitive activities. Otherwise, one must be engaged in sense gratification, since one cannot live without engagement. Without Krishna consciousness, one must be always seeking self-centered or extended selfish activities. But a Krishna conscious person can do everything for the satisfaction of Krishna and thereby be perfectly detached from sense gratification. One who has no such realization must mercantily try to escape material desires before being elevated to the top rung of the yoga ladder. Hare Krishna, thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Right, so you see, transcendental loving service, this loving devotional service brings by a lot of peace within oneself, right? He's naturally happy. Okay, that's the potency of this loving service to Krishna. Okay. Right, 6.5. Who wants to read next? Anybody else wants to read?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna. How are you, Mata?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you, Mata?
Okay, welcome.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. May I read text 5?
5, please.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. उद्धरेदात्मनात्मानं नात्मानं वसादचेत आत्मेव आत्मनो बन्धुरा आत्मेव रिपुरात्मनः. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Purport. The word Atma denotes a body, mind, and soul, depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned souls are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of science. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be affected by the glitter of material nature. And in this way, the conditioned souls may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The mind one is attracted by sense objects. The more one becomes entangled in material existence, best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in a Krishna consciousness. The word he is used for emphasizing this point, that is that one must do this. It is also said mana eva manushyanam karnam bandha mokshayah bandhya bandhaya vishya sanga muktiye muktiye nirvishyam manah. For man, mind is the cause of bondage and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in a sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind is detached from the sense object is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad 2. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in a Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation. Hare Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. So you see how the mind, such a strong element. Huh? The mind can either be your friend or your enemy, actually. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So it can play a dual role, depending on how you train it and how you engage it. That's the bottom line. So, see, we said that the soul is also made up of the mind, right? The mind is a very strong point. It is here within our bodies, in the soul. And even when we leave our bodies, it's still there. It's part of the soul as a subtle form of energy. So therefore, this mind needs to be trained very, very carefully. And Prabhupada is saying here that, in fact, the pure soul, right, entangled in the material world, is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with false ego, which desires to lord it over more material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted to the glitter of material nature. And there is one way only to train the mind. And what's the best way to train the mind? The best way, Prabhupada says here, is to disentangle oneself, is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. You have to practice to engage this mind in Krishna consciousness. Then only will the mind become your friend, or else the mind will be your enemy. It will start dictating to you what to do and what not to do. And it'll start dictating, if you are not engaging Krishna consciousness, it'll attract you to sense enjoyment, as Prabhupada puts it here, to the glitter, attracted to the glitter of material nature. Okay. So the mind can cause bondage if it is materially inclined. But then again, and that's how it will be an enemy. And the mind can also cause liberation. And that's when the mind is the friend. Because when the mind is absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it gets detached from sense objects. And that will cause your liberation. Thus, the mind becomes your friend. Right, we've got one more verse here, 6. Okay, who wants to read next? Sorry, for some reason I can't see the participants on this chat. I don't know if it's because I've got my screen shared. Any other volunteers? Who wants to read this next verse? Anyone want to read? Dean Prabhu, you want to try?
Yeah, okay, Mataji, I will,
Yeah.
but there's a problem with the Sanskrit. I can't really read that too well.
That's why, but do you want to try it? If you want to try it, you can. If not, it's okay.
I can read the English part of it, that's fine.
Okay, let me read the verse and then you read the English, right?
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Bandhur Atma Manastasya, Yenatmaivatmana Jitah, Atmanastu Shatrutve, Vartetatmaiva Shatruvad. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, Dean Prabhu.
Okay, Hare Krishna. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. And when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes a Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu. You see, this purport in this verse reminds me of the earlier chapters where Arjun was referring to Bhagwan, to Krishna as Rishikesha, and he deliberately called Krishna Rishikesh because Rishikesh means the controller or the director of senses. And Arjun was actually, by calling Krishna Rishikesh, he was praying to Krishna to direct his senses, direct his mind in the correct way. So, yeah, it's nice to meditate on this. So we should, if we want to take direction from the Lord, who's seated within our hearts as Paramatma, we want that, then we should be Krishna conscious. We should engage in a devotional service. We should train the mind in that way. And we should pray to Lord Rishikesh to help us in that manner. Okay. And once that happens, the Lord takes mercy and he starts directing you. See? Prabhupada says here, one who takes the Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically because he is within our heart. He knows our desires and he'll fulfill your desires accordingly. So be careful of what you desire. Purify those thoughts by engaging in bhakti. Engage in bhakti yoga. Do everything to please Krishna. Detach from material life by engaging in devotional service. It's not something that is easy. It is not something that can happen overnight. But Prabhupada has been so kind to us that he has given us all these beautiful scriptures to read. He has translated so many scriptures for us into different languages, Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We just need to read and take from there and follow what Prabhupada says there. And everything is there on how to practice this devotional service. And by just following all those instructions from Prabhupada's books, goal will surely be achieved at some point. And then the mind can become our best friend, as Krishna is saying in this verse 6. Can't conquer the mind easily. Hard to conquer the mind, but we can engage it in God-conscious activities, in Krishna consciousness. And by doing so, it becomes our friend. And once the mind is our friend, then the Lord starts directing from within. See? All right. Okay. So there were a few more verses, and I wanted to go through the yoga ladder. But I don't know now if we're going to have time. We've got 10 minutes left. We've got 7, we've got 8. Okay, let's read this one quickly. Om Jitatmanaha Pranastasya Paramatma Samahitaha Sitosna Sukha Dukheshu Tatamana Pamanayoho Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Srila Prabhupada says in his purport, actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by external illusionary energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one would be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of Paramatma or the Super Soul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is Krishna conscious, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practically samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. And then one more verse, verse number 8. Jnana vijnana triptatma kutasto vichetendriyaha yukto iti uchyate yogi samalotshama kanchanaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or a mystique when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Srila Prabhupada says, book knowledge without realization of the supreme truth is useless. This is stated as follows. Ataha Shri Krishna Namadina Bhaved Grahayam Indriyaha Sevana Mukhehi Jivado Svayam Eva Spurati Yadaha. No one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, qualities, pastimes of Shri Krishna through his materially contaminated senses. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord are the transcendental name, form, quality, and pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. This is extracted from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1, 2, 2, 3. So you see, you can't understand by just reading it and thinking, okay, like in a book form. This understanding only comes about by how? When you are saturated in transcendental service to the Lord. So that's still bottom line, that's our link. This Bhagavad Gita is the science of Krishna consciousness. No one can become Krishna conscious simply by mundane scholarship. One must be fortunate enough to associate with a person who is in pure Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious person has realized knowledge by the grace of Krishna because he is satisfied with pure devotional service. By realized knowledge, one becomes perfect. By transcendental knowledge, one can remain steady in his convictions, but by mere academic knowledge, one can easily be deluded and confused by apparent contradictions. It is the realized soul who is actually self-controlled because he is surrendered to Krishna. He is transcendental because he has nothing to do with the mundane scholarship. For him, mundane scholarship and mental speculation, which may be as good as gold to others, are of no greater value than pebbles or stones. So this is a transcendentalist. He has a true knowledge. It's not just on a mundane material platform. Okay, so we may, on this material platform, have many academic qualifications, which is nice to have. It's good to have. But as long as we don't realize our connection with our Supreme Lord, and as long as we don't realize our position in this world and our goal to be achieved, then that knowledge is just mundane and of no use. In fact, does any material knowledge or scholarship gained in this material world should only serve as a springboard to study even further on the spiritual path. It should be like impetus to push forward more study of scripture and spread it out to others. See, like Srila Prabhupada got an instruction from his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada. He told Srila Prabhupada that if you have money, just print books. Print books, translate them into other languages and spread them to the West. Prabhupada had an academic qualification. But look how it was dovetailed now to Krishna consciousness. He used that and the instruction from his Guru Maharaj to do such a great service to humanity, to the entire world. Look how he spread Krishna consciousness so far and wide. Now that is true knowledge. Not that you have academic knowledge and you sit with it and say, I am professor, doctor, or whatever, and then you just sit with it. And then what happens when you leave your body? You leave and you come back here, and then you've got to study again to become that professor or that doctor or that engineer or whatever. And you'll be caught up in this ridiculous cycle of birth and death over and over again. But if you take to transcendental knowledge, if you take to Krishna consciousness, and then spread it that way, then if such a person even has to be born again in this world, he does not have to start from scratch. Because you basically such a soul will pick up or continue rather his Krishna consciousness from the point in which he left in his previous life, until he reaches his highest goal of perfection. Okay. Until he becomes totally self-realized, true yogi. And then we're going to leave this for next week, the yoga ladder. I've got this Paramatma Prabhu shared with us on the WhatsApp chat, this little slide here. And then I've got another one as well, which is a little more brief, and I think we should use to discuss. And we can go through it next week and also read a little bit on what Prabhupada said here about yoga ladder. So we leave that too. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I'm going to end up with the Shingadev pranams. But before I do pranams, can we just stop the recording, quick realizations, and then we'll do the Shingadev pranams until next week. Hare Krishna.